And I'm going to attempt to answer the three questions that I'm always asked. Why should I invest in renewables? Why should I invest in renewables now? And why is Federation the right platform to invest in renewables? So taking each of those three questions one by one. Well, there are push and pull factors for investing in renewables. The push factors are the facts. Today, most of the electricity generated in Australia is still generated by the coal fleet, and that coal fleet is ageing. There hasn't been a new coal-fired power station built in the national electricity market for 15 years, since Cogan Creek in Queensland. And there's a reason for that. They are expensive. The fleet is old and it's retiring. It needs to be retired. Now, the energy regulator estimates that over the next 15 to 20 years, we will need to construct approximately 65 gigawatts of renewable energy to support the transition in the national electricity market. To put it in context, that is 85 Cogan Creek power stations, which need to be built in the next 15 to 20 years. So they're the push factors. The coal fleet is old, it's becoming unreliable, it needs to be retired. The pull factor is economics. If we wish to lower the cost of energy in Australia, there is no alternative to renewable energy. The CSIRO conducted a study that demonstrates that the cheapest energy we can get is from solar and from wind. And that's not changing. Those technologies continue to get cheaper. If you look at what we learned with the closure of the Hazelwood power station in Victoria, the great takeaway from that is you need to be prepared for the retirement of the coal fleet. When you take a large generator out of the system, you cause disruption in pricing and volatility. And so the way to avoid that is to have the replacement generation in place ahead of the retirement of the coal fleet. We didn't do that in the case of Hazelwood. We are now seeking to do that. There's a lot of planning around when the thermal fleet will close. The next closure will be Liddell in 2022, 2023. And we're already preparing and putting in place the replacement generation for that. So we need to get ahead of the retirement of coal fleet. Thus, the time to be investing in renewables is right now. In addition to the normal strategic planning, governments of all persuasions, state and federal, are really now alert to this need for the technical evolution to variable renewable energy, and have been putting in place the large growth of renewable energy coming into the grid. So, for example, at a federal level, the government's thinking about and planning the transition through to variable renewable energy and ultimately to technologies such as hydrogen. If you look at the states, New South Wales, for example, has the Renewable Energy Zone plan. Not only are they setting out where the renewable energy zones will be, but the infrastructure that needs to evacuate the energy from those zones into the national grid. Queensland's very active with the establishment of CleanCo to contract and encourage investment in renewable energy, as is Victoria. So through a combination of learning from our mistakes with Hazelwood and having the right policy frameworks now in place, and the need to get ahead of this wave of retirements, now is exactly the time to be investing in renewable energy and investing at scale. We've talked through the need and the urgency of the investment, and now being the right time to invest in renewables. Federation has a differentiated approach to investing in infrastructure generally and renewables in particular. You need to be active. We're not a passive investor. We don't seek to have others develop assets and then simply own them. We seek to invest to develop the best quality projects at the best points in the grid. We have a strategy we call the Platforms and Portfolio Strategy, and that is about seeking to acquire the businesses, the capability to provide us with not only privileged access to a pipeline of projects, but to provide us with the skills and the capability to de-risk those projects and bring them through to fruition, through to operation in the most effective manner possible. A classic example of this was the WindLab acquisition. We acquired that business because it gave us a staff of 50 people, expertive in renewables and all of the engineering that you need to deliver high quality renewable projects into the grid. And with that, we also acquired a portfolio of 7.5 gigawatts of projects spread across the national electricity market. So that creates a privileged access for us to deploy capital into the development of projects, and in our experience results in the highest quality projects. So for example, the two best wind projects in Australia at the moment in terms of capacity factor were both developed by WindLab. We teamed with WindLab to provide them the capital to do that right across the national electricity market and in Western Australia, and to do that at scale. Federation takes a very calibrated approach to risk. We seek to invest in projects at a late stage of development and bring them all the way through to operations and own and operate those projects. To achieve that and achieve that successfully, we need to understand the risks that we're taking, to calibrate those risks, and ultimately to ensure that we're being properly compensated for the risk of bringing a project from a development stage through contracting to operation. Federation seeks to deliver gross returns of 12% IRR on our project. But at the outset, before we seek to make money for our investors, we seek to understand how we're not going to lose our investors' capital. So we have a capital protection bias, a very calibrated approach to risk, and then a balanced approach to risk and return.